This is a solution to just one version of the quiz. If you have particular questions about your answers and it's not from this version, just send me an email and I can share with you the corresponding solution to the version that you had. In these questions, we're just getting used to the inverse function notation, and to contrast it with what we've done before, I have both kinds of questions here, both for evaluating a function and for evaluating the inverse. So at number one, we're asking what is the value of g of negative 4. And so that's just a regular question. There's no inverses involved here. And so that just literally means put minus 4 in for an input into the g function. And so I can do that. Worst case is you might need a calculator, but I think the numbers here are not too bad. So in the numerator, you'll be putting in for a negative 4 for x. You'll have 3 times negative 4 plus 2. The denominator, it'll be this. I would always just evaluate those separately before putting in the calculator. So the numerator simplifies to minus 10. The denominator simplifies to minus 25. So minus 10 over positive 25 is just 0.4 or 2/5 as a reduced fraction, however you want to write it. For question 2, on the other hand, we are asked for the inverse function, so it's f inverse of minus 4. And so what we talked about this week was when we have a question about the inverse function, we should think of it as an equation. So here is an equation involving input negative 4 and output c. And what we learned is any equation like this that involves the inverse can be rewritten as a corresponding equation about the original function f. So these two things are the same. So those two statements mean the same thing. But finding a value of c so that f of c equals negative 4 is something that we've done before. So I just kick into that mode. I'm now just going to find the c, so I'm solving the equation f of c equals minus 4. F of c means 2c minus 8 and equals negative 4. So here I'm just plugging into the formula for f. So instead of f of c, I'll have 2c minus 8, just plugging c in for x in my formula. So therefore, I can just do regular old algebra here. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides, meaning that 2c is equal to positive 4, and that means that c is equal to 2. So the c here is 2. So I could say that f inverse of minus 4 is equal to 2. That's my answer. And if I wanted to explain it, I could say it's simply because f of 2 equals minus 4. Right? These are the same. These two things mean exactly the same thing. But my answer is 2. Okay, so in the graph problems, the most common thing that people did here was a lot of people knew what points I was talking about, but they forgot what the actual question was. So the question here in both cases is to give a value of a function. So we're going to estimate a value of the function, and our explanation for it is going to be a mark on the graph. H of negative 1, again, that is not a question about inverses. That's just a normal statement about the function h. It means I want to find the output when the input is negative 1. So h of negative 1 means find the output of h when the input is negative 1. And this graph is the graph of h. So we know the input into a function corresponds to the x-coordinate. So by saying the input is negative 1, which is what we're saying here, that means that we're looking for a point on the graph where the first coordinate is negative 1. So negative 1 is right there. So that point right there has its first coordinate, negative 1, and its second coordinate, positive 1. Make it a little bit more like what I said. So put a circle there, like it says in the instructions. But the point negative 1, 1 is the point on the graph that's relevant. And so what that means is that when the input is negative 1, the output is 1. So this is the answer to the question. That's the value of h of negative 1. H of negative 1 is 1. A lot of people marked the point or told me the coordinates of the point, but remember the value of a function is just a number. So try to make sure that you're paying attention to the actual question that's being asked and make sure that you answer that question. So similarly, the second question also, the answer should be a number. In this case, this is a question about the inverse function, and so just like before, we saw that when we have a question about the inverse, I want to think of it as an equation. So again, I'll give it a letter name. I know that that means the same thing as saying h of c equals 3. Right? So these two statements are identical. H inverse and H have reversed inputs and outputs. So this statement, h of c equals 3, on the graph would mean that there's a point on the graph that has this form. The output is the second coordinate. So the point c comma 3 must be on the graph. So I can go looking on the graph for a point that has its second coordinate 3, and that's the one I want to use. So I come up here, second coordinate 3 would be about there. So right around there is my point. That's the one I would want to mark with an X. And the coordinates of that point look to be about negative 2.7, comma 3. And so what I'm finding is, because of that point, h of negative 2.7 is approximately 3. So that means that h inverse of 3 is approximately negative 2.7. So once again, my answer is negative 2.7, and my reasoning is because of the point on the graph.